Started. Welcome to the Lawyers Emotional Intelligence Book Club, session number 4 for January 25th, 2017. My name is Dave Scriven-Young, a lawyer focusing on litigation, environmental law, and construction law from Chicago, Illinois, here in my home office in Naperville, Illinois, suburb of Chicago. The purpose of the book club is to do a deep dive into books that will help us develop our emotional intelligence skills. Specifically, think about how we can begin to use these skills in our law practices. I'm here on Periscope every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Central for this discussion, and I really do mean it as a discussion. So please liberally use the box below to ask questions or make comments. Certainly don't sit here as an expert, but on the contrary, I'll be learning along with all of you, and I look forward to hearing your opinions and observations. And I do look forward to learning from all of you during this book club. As a reminder, to keep up with the book club, I encourage you to join the online discussion on our Facebook group at facebook.com/lawyersEQ and on my Twitter account, twitter.com/ILEnviroLawBlog. Before we get started for this session number 4, just wanted to tell you a little bit about what I'm up to. It's kind of a dreary day in Chicago. It's been a weird winter, actually. It's been kind of warm, kind of rainy. Although I hear the snow is coming tomorrow, so we'll see how that goes. Just got back from Bermuda for the ABA section of litigation leadership meeting, which was a great time, great group of people. Really looking forward to continuing my work with them. And then next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, I'll be in Miami for the ABA mid-year meeting in Miami. So really looking forward to that as well. So why don't we get started? Today we're talking about chapters 2 and 3 of The Thank You Economy by Gary Vaynerchuk. And here's the man himself, Gary Vaynerchuk. And so let's start off with our first quote today. So chapter 1, if you recall, really talks about sort of what the thank you economy is and how Gary Vaynerchuk's big thesis is how social media has changed the environment that we're in. And we talk a little bit about how social media has changed the law practice as well. But in particular, his thesis is that social media has made us come full circle in that once we were very localized economy where we dealt with our own local shopkeeper and the like, and then we went to the big corporate environment where people didn't corporations, didn't care about the consumer. All they cared about was the almighty dollar. And now with social media, we've come back full circle where the people now have the ability to share again and keep up with people from across the country. And really, because of things like Twitter and Facebook, they're able to give recommendations and also complaints about what they're seeing in the landscape. And so what chapters 2 and 3 talk about is how corporations have reacted to social media and what corporations should do about it. And we'll talk a little bit about how lawyers in their practices and their daily lives really need to go ahead and make changes as well and adapt to the environment. So the first point that he makes in this chapter is don't draw a line in the sand. Basically, and we'll go through the first quote. So he says, most people's DNA simply doesn't allow them an entrepreneur's anticipation skills. They don't see potential in the unknown. They see a threat to their comfort zone. So their knee-jerk reaction is to draw a deep line in the sand between themselves and anything new or unproven, especially when it comes to technology. Corporate America loves e-commerce now. So remember, Gary Vaynerchuk was writing this book a few years ago, and so this was when e-commerce was a little bit more institutionalized. But business leaders at that point in time had simply drawn the line in the sand when it comes to social media, this time putting distance between their companies and social media, all the while desperately clinging to the security that they still believe numbers can provide. But unfortunately, if you wait until social media is able to prove itself, to you before deciding to engage with your customers one-on-one, you'll have missed your greatest window of opportunity to move ahead of your competitors. And I think this next quote really encapsulates what we face right now as lawyers. So he says, "You think Barnes and Noble and Borders didn't see Amazon coming in 1997? Of course they did. But the numbers distracted them, and the numbers said that Amazon was nowhere near making a profit, and Barnes and Noble and Borders were still the number one and number two book retailers in the country." So here's the question: and I posit it to everyone watching today, and if you're watching this at a later time, I really encourage you to, either in the Facebook group or wherever you see this video stream, make a comment, either whether on the YouTube channel or on the Facebook group. Make a comment, and I'd love to hear some of your answers to this question. But in what areas do you see lawyers drawing lines in the sand? That's the first question today. And while you guys think about sort of what your answers are, I think lawyers, in many ways, and just thinking practically about our daily practices, we might draw lines in the sand on behalf of clients all the time, right? They opposing counsel or the opposing party might make unreasonable demands. They may not produce documents that you need. And so you need to draw a line in the sand and say, look, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, then I'll file a motion to compel or file a motion for sanctions or something like that. So in our regular practices, we really see that you can draw a line in the sand. But what about technology and sort of this changing landscape? I think lawyers oftentimes are drawing a line in the sand on technology, in terms of not only social media, but also the other outlets that are there, that lawyers are kind of not only drawing lines in the sand, but also putting their heads in the sand. Um, Things like Avo, or even I've seen, I think it was the American Bar Association that is putting together a group of folks who are answering consumers' questions for free. What that really means is that um, basic legal questions, things like the document preparation services, and Ann says, from a business standpoint, staying tied to billable hours for reward systems. That's actually a really great point as well. So not only what I was saying, but also with the alternative billing arrangements. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, where clients, especially millennial clients that are coming along, they're really changing their minds in what they want. They want alternative billing structures, whereas a lot of attorneys simply won't do that. They only bill by the hour. They want a big retainer up front, and they're going to lose a lot of those clients, or they may not even be able to get those clients as well. So yeah, that was a really great point, and another great comment. While everyone else is thinking, I'll move on to basically with the Avo and the document preparation services that I was talking about, certainly those are things that are coming along this hype. They're here. I mean, that's the Amazon.com that's coming along, and a lot of lawyers are just the Borders and the Barnes and Noble. They're going to go the same way as Borders and Barnes and Noble. I don't think there are even any Borders anymore. I think they went bankrupt. Barnes and Noble, I think, is hanging on in a few large shopping malls. But we need to change if we're going to stay alive and in our practices. So let's move on to the next subject, which is the symbiotic relationship between trust and the return on investment. And so what he's talking about here is his focus is social media. Um, Very true. Lawyers must find they add unique value to clients. That's absolutely correct. Um, and Right, and so the question is, as the commenter just pointed out, certainly the value proposition is changing, because folks who the new client wants to be involved in their case. They want to get information up front. They want alternative billing arrangements a lot of the time. And so we needed to adapt to that. So going back to the trust and return on investment. So Gary's point, Gary Vaynerchuk's point in this part of the book is that he started this digital agency on social media, and he was really thinking about how to answer the questions to clients. What is the return on investment in social media? Because you can see, you know what television ratings are. You might know how many people pass a billboard if you're talking about outdoor advertising. You might know how what your circulation is for a newspaper or magazine. Although of course those things are diminishing as well. But his point oftentimes, and I've heard him say this many times, is what is this? What is the return on investment of a simple relationship? Like, what is the return on investment on your relationship with your mom or your dad? It's really incalculable. And what he says is really social media helps you engage those relationships with anyone, really, with whoever you think your target audience is. So let's go through the quote. When Nielsen conducted a study on what drives consumer trust, the results were clear. Almost 70% of people turn to family and friends for advice when making purchasing decisions. Where have people been talking to their family and friends lately? Facebook reports that 60% of the people online are going to social networks, with half returning every day. And again, those numbers I'm sure are much more than 60% at this point, and I'm sure most do return every day as I do. If there is ROI, return on investment in friendship and family, there has to be ROI in social media. So here's the question as to lawyers. And this is probably obvious. This is an obvious one, I think. Do lawyers need to build trust? With whom do they need to build trust? And what qualities do lawyers need to develop to build trust? And I think a lot of the times with the use of social media, you see people just throwing content out. Maybe you're, sending an article out and saying, this is a very interesting article. And then there's really not a lot of engagement between the person using social media and the recipient who's following that person. And so that's where Gary Vaynerchuk talks about in the book about engaging with your customers, and in our cases with our clients. But do lawyers need to build trust? I think everyone would say yes. And with whom do we need to build trust? That's the next question. Well, I think your clients, potential clients, judges, opposing counsel, jurors, and so those are just some of the people. I don't know if there's anyone else. Court reporters. Maybe I said that already. But there's a whole range of people that I think as lawyers we need to build trust, because really, in our profession, trust is a huge thing. It is probably, with integrity, it's probably one of the um, best things to have, because if you're not trusted, then you can't build a relationship with your client. They want to know that you have expertise and that you'll do the right thing for them, and they can only develop that trust, or they can only have those feelings if they have trust in you. So the next question is, what qualities do lawyers need to develop to build trust? So some of the things that I have thought about are things like empathy, whether you can put yourself in your client's shoes and understand. Transparency is another one from Nan, from one of the commenters online. That's another great one, and especially in this day and age, it's huge because, again, millennial clients, really any clients these days, because of the shift in social media, they can see exactly what's going on with you, and it's very hard now for people to hide the ball. And you're turning in, simply clients are just not going to put up for it. What other qualities do we need to develop to build trust? Empathy, transparency, obviously expertise in your legal field. You need to know not only the subject matter, but it's important, to know the court system, to know your judge, and that sort of thing. And so those are just some of the areas that I think that we need to build trust. And ultimately, I would argue, and I hope all of you would agree, since you're on this live stream or watching this at some later point, is that lawyers need emotional intelligence skills more than ever to develop that, or to build that trust with clients and with everyone else in the legal system. And those skills are just going to become more important as we come along the line, because we've turned back. Remember, the whole thesis is that we're in a nameless, faceless culture where corporations were dealing nationwide because of the internet, because of e-commerce, and they didn't have to worry. They didn't have to build that trust. And attorneys we're the same way, although I think to a lesser extent, because I think a lot of relate attorneys have always dealt on one-on-one relationships, especially when you're representing an individual. But in a corporate culture, I think a lot of the times, back in maybe the 80s, 90s, uh, practice is or was different than it is now, and certainly will be different in the future, where corporate clients are going to be really watching us, and certainly for private practitioners, for people who are dealing with being audited by either their insurance company or by their client, to know exactly what's going on. Transparency is key, and all those emotional intelligence skills are going to come into play. So let's move on to the next point, and he's talking about transforming customers into advocates, which is a big one. A big one to me, because you can really have you have your clients and you have people who may be interested in what you do, but really the time has come, and I think a lot of the research has showed that the biggest thing that we can do is have an advocate for yourself and for me, not only for your business, so having a client who did business with you and will sing your praises, but also an advocate within your firm, within your bar association, within whatever organization that you're in, that would advocate on your behalf. Not just someone who's a fan, who follows along, but someone who will sing your praises and help you in ways that you need to be helped. So let's go through the quote here. He says, "Without social media, you and your customers are relegated to strangers. With it, depending on your efforts, you can potentially upgrade your relationship to that of casual acquaintances and even in time friends. The power of that relationship can go so far as to convert a casual browser into a committed buyer, or a buyer into an advocate. Every company should be bending over backwards to transform customers into advocates. They are extremely valuable." So that's sort of what advocates are: people who will, again, sing your praises on your behalf. And social media, he's saying, is going to help you convert someone who is just simply someone interested in what you do, but someone who can be maybe a casual acquaintance, maybe a friend online, and then go into a committed buyer and even into an advocate, who is what I would call a raving fan of your work. But advocates are bred, he says, not born. And according to Nielsen, consumers are generally more motivated to reach out to a company with a complaint than with praise. However, they are willing to publicly praise a company when given the opportunity to do so. Social media allows companies to provide ample prompts for consumers to remember why they like a brand and inspire them to say so publicly, whether on the company website or via social networking channels. So in other words, what he's saying is that in a social media context, you can use social media to remind people that you're out there. so you can convert the folks from casual observers into customers, buyers, and even advocates. And the way you do that is by reminding them and building that relationship with them. So here's the next question. Why are advocates, and I already talked about this already, but I'd love to hear the thoughts of everyone online. Why are advocates important for lawyers in terms of career development or advancement and business development? So that's the question that we need to first think about as lawyers. And I think in terms of career development, I've seen an advancement, and I've seen a lot about this, especially in the diversity context. But I think it's true. I think it's true generally, and I think people, I think, miss the boat a lot of the times, is that building relationships, whether it's in your firm or bar association or wherever that you want to try to develop yourself and advance, it's really critical because you might meet a lot of people. You might be friendly with folks. And Nan says business referrals, sponsors, supporters are key. And that's exactly right. And I guess what what the author of the book I think is calling advocates. I think sponsor is another great word that I've heard, in that you really want to have someone who is going to go to bat for you. You're going to want someone to walk into that partnership meeting and say, and stand up and say, look, this person, Sam, he's a great guy. He's a wonderful person. He, just essentially sing your praises in a partnership meeting and put you up for partnership. Or in a bar association context, a lot of bar associations have nominating committees where you have to go in front of a committee and someone will essentially put in your name for a nomination. Someone to stand up and say, look, Tina is, this wonderful attorney. She does all this great work. She does this pro bono, and this is exactly the kind of person that you want on your board or executive officer for a bar association and the like. So that's really key. As far as business development, I can't tell you how important it is for attorneys to build or to have advocates on their behalf, because, and again, there's a ton of lawyers out there, a ton of lawyers who are practicing, a ton of lawyers who need jobs, and you need to have people on your side. So if a legal problem comes to their doorstep, whether it's a non-lawyer or a lawyer, and they know that you can handle it, an advocate is going to turn to them and say, look, there's this really great person, Nathan, and he can really handle this, and I really trust that will do a really great job for you. And so on those referral relationships, that's really, really key to have an advocate on your side. So next question, how can lawyers go about breeding advocates for them or their firm? And breeding is just a word that the author uses in this book. So because he says that advocates are bred, and it's not necessarily natural, and it's not, because I think it's hard at times for people to come out and recommend someone or refer work to someone, because you don't know how it's going to work out. But if they're an advocate for you, they're absolutely going to go to bat for you. So the question is, how can lawyers go about breeding advocates for them or their firm? And again, and I'm going to go back to this again and again and again, but I think the point is building relationships, building a personal relationship with folks. And so how do you, and this will be something, of course, that we talk about later, in other books in this book club. So we're certainly going to come back to this topic. But what Gary Vaynerchuk says in this book is social media relationships and personal relationships work exactly the same way. You get out of them what you put into them. You can't buy them, force them, or make them into something they're not ready to be. And so all you have to do, and again, it's funny I say that all you have to do is because it takes a lot of time and a lot of work and a lot of hustle. But you got to put in the time to build relationships with folks if you want to build them into advocates. And you want to do it authentically. Um, I've seen a lot of lawyers at networking meetings, just uh, I remember one time I was at an environmental committee meeting for the Chicago Bar Association, and it was probably the second or third meeting. I was a very young lawyer, and I just remember this man coming in. I assume he was a lawyer. I don't remember exactly, but um, he essentially had a sack of business cards, and he walked from table to table and just dumped business cards on people. So, and I'm not sure what the point of it was. I mean, I guess I know that he was trying to just give out, get his name out there, but he wasn't trying to build those relationships. Instead, he was trying to, just force it. And you really can't force a relationship like that. And so what we're going to be talking about, later on in terms of building relationships and things you could do in practical tips, is how to build those relationships. But I think my rambling here has made the point very well, that you need an advocate both for your career and for your business, and you also need to build advocates or breed advocates, and the way you do that is through relationships. So let's move on to the next point. Don't take any person for granted. So what he's saying here is, who can be an advocate, who can be someone who can stand up for you. And what he says here is that anyone who takes a dismissive attitude toward any customer is heading for disaster. Joe and Jane have the power, and what Joe and Jane say matters. And again, his context is the realm of social media, where they can go on Yelp, Facebook, Twitter, and either say really great things about you and your firm, or they can say really bad things about you and your firm. He says you cannot reserve your care and attention for your best, most profitable, most desirable customers anymore. And that's because it doesn't matter. The power is equalized when it comes to social media. You don't have to. I mean, I guess you need a smartphone, or internet access, or a computer, which in this day and age, people have. And so from your, you know, client who needs a very basic will, to, the most, important person on earth with billions of dollars and needs a very uh, uh, complex business plan, or estate plan, you need to pay attention to them and care about them equally, because the point is that the really rich guy with lots of money, he can go on the internet and say just as much stuff, either positive or negative, as the person without the money or the wealth, but still has a smartphone. They may not have the same uh, megaphone, although maybe they might. If you think about people, and I'm not talking about famous people. I'm just talking about someone with $1 million, as opposed to someone who's um, uh, not not as well off, if you will. Um, Certainly, you don't know who has more followers or friends. You have no idea what's going on in that context. So that's what he's saying. The playing field has been leveled, and so what can you do about that? He says you have the tools at your disposal to scale that kind of caring across the board to everyone who even looks your way, and your customers expect you to use them. Your big spenders and casual browsers all are living within the same ecosystem, which is what I just talked about, where news of how you treat one customer can easily spread to hundreds of other current and even potential ones. That's a big, big deal. So don't take any person for granted. And again, this maybe this is obvious, and maybe, but I think it's something that everyone needs to be reminded of. That even it doesn't matter who it is. And again, you know, maybe it's just my own sort of sensibilities, and but it should be true generally that everyone is nice to each other. But that's just not the case, obviously. And so if you're an attorney and you want to look to the future and adapt to the future of what's going on, then you don't take any person for granted. And so for the attorneys out there, the questions are: Is this is this all a little bit overwhelming? And that's what that was my initial question when I was reading through this chapter, and that was the note that I made actually. Is this all a little bit overwhelming? That it doesn't matter, who it is that's involved. Doesn't matter who the client is, no matter if they're powerful or not. They can all say different things. They can all sing your praises, or register a negative remark, and that could really put a damper on your career. So it's a little bit overwhelming. So the question is, how can attorneys possibly manage all the legal work plus do these one-on-one conversations online? And that's what he's talking about. The author of the book, Gary Vaynerchuk, is very clear in his what he wants is for people to not only build their relationships, but to engage in a conversation. And that's how you build a potential client base online. How do you do that if you're an attorney who's really busy in a firm? You have billable hours to make. How do you make those one-on-one conversations online? And we're going to get into that, but I think it depends on where you're at. Depends on if you're a solo practitioner, if you're in a large firm, your resources there are going to be much different, and the culture is going to be much different. I think oftentimes, if you're a solo practitioner or you're a mid-sized practitioner, although you may not have the resources, you may have more freedom in terms of being more entrepreneurial online than you would with an attorney, with a big firm. I'm sorry, and so that's maybe thinking about creative ways to do that, and then also, of course, think about potentially hiring someone to do your social media. But I think you really need to be careful, and you need to be really selective in who you choose to do that if you go that route, because you want to make sure that it's not just someone pushing out content, that it's someone who's actually engaging with the person that has either contacted you or that you want to build that relationship with. So it's a big question about possibly managing all that legal work, and Gary Vaynerchuk always says to hustle, and that's what we're gonna have to do, and that's what through this book club we're gonna be putting our thinking hats on and really thinking about how to develop skills that will allow us to build those relationships, and to make sure that we can adapt to the changing environment in the legal community. And finally, the final point that we're getting to today is to not be complacent, but to go on the offense. So what he says is that any company that gets so complacent that it thinks everything is fine deserves to go out of business. It literally means its leaders have stopped caring. A competitive company is always on the offense. Always, always, always. And I go back to the story that I told on the very first session of this live stream, in that I totally remember being in a large law firm, and it was complete complacency. In that, they told associates, you don't got to worry about building business. You certainly don't got to worry about, getting out there. You just bill your hours. The work will always be there. And then the economic crisis came and wiped out jobs, wiped out firms, and it was a really bad time. And it was because firms became complacent and thought the institutional clients would always be there for them. They didn't realize that the institutional clients were the ones that were going to be going downhill. The institutional clients were going to be the ones that were going to be ditching the $1,000 rates, or going to be ditching billable hours. And so, what we have to do as attorneys, if we want to adapt to the changing environment, is to think about how we can go on the offense. So he goes on to say that in the future, the companies with tremendous relationship capital will be the ones to succeed. Society has created an ecosystem that rewards good manners, high touch, honesty, and integrity. So again, those are the emotional intelligence skills that we're going to learn throughout this book club. In the end, no matter what obstacles a company faces in the thank you economy, the solution will always be the same. Competitors are bigger, outcare them. They're cheaper, outcare them. They've got celebrity status and you don't, outcare them. In the end, it is the businesses that have established strong relationships with their customers that will come out on top. And so the question again is, how can attorneys go on the offense? And it's building the skills that we need, the emotional intelligence skills, the relationship skills that are going to allow us to go on the offense, to adapt to the changing technology, and to gain new clients and keep our existing clients. So that's all that I had for tonight. I want to thank you for joining me. The next discussion is going to be chapters 4 and 5 of the Thank You Economy. To keep up with the book club, I encourage you to join the Facebook group at facebook.com/lawyersEQ and my Twitter account, twitter.com/ILEnvirolawblog. The next live broadcast to discuss chapters 4 and 5 of the Thank You Economy will be Wednesday, February 1st at 7 p.m. Central on Periscope. And again, I just want to thank you guys so much for being with me. And again, if you're enjoying this live stream, please make a comment. If you want to answer any of the questions that I post during the discussion this evening, if you want to, if you have any suggestions about this live stream, certainly. This is a work in progress, and it probably always will be a work in progress. I started this just to get things moving, to get it online. Something that emotional intelligence is something that I wanted to think about, and I knew that it was something that attorneys needed to know broadly. And so I'm learning along with all of you. So if if you have suggestions for books, if you have suggestions for what platforms this live stream should be on, please either send me a note online or feel free to comment anywhere where this live stream tape is going to be found. So I want to thank you very much. I hope all of you have a pleasant evening. Have a good night, everyone.